Thank you. Before the Board of Ed meeting begins, I'd like to read a short little statement, and I'd like to continue doing this before every Board of Education meeting, and I hope that's okay with the board members. The Board of Ed is committed to supporting continuous improvement leading to student achievement and success. Let this be the basis for all our decisions. I thank you. Now, as student representatives.
Good evening, everyone. It's been a while, so we have lots of news to report. First of all, the POMPROG debate team attended a tournament at Glastonbury High School on February 6th. The debate topic was federal land should be largely turned over to the states. And we had several wins, with a novice speaker coming in first place, and then novice and varsity teams coming in third place in their respective divisions. Our next tournament will be on March 12th and is going to be held here at PHS. Also, Pilobolus Dance performed at POMPROG High School on February 19th and 20th. Pilobolus performs a unique creative movement style of dance, and it was performed by children, adults, and even a POMPROG High School teacher, Madame Bosman, from the language department. French Culture Night was held by the French Honor Society on February 24th. Students from all grades came to eat French food baked by members of FHS and watch a French movie called Le Chef. Also, the talent show was held last Thursday, February 25th, and featured performances from students from all grades. Performances included musical acts, dancing, beatboxing, even a hula hoop routine, and a magic show. And the seniors finished off the night with a performance of the song Footloose. That's all from me, and here's Nick.
Okay, I have a quick update on sports. The boys and girls track team took second place at SWCs last week. The girls basketball team is playing right now in the first round of the CIAC tournament in the main gym. The boys basketball team will be playing in the semifinals of the SWC tournament this week. The course registration process for next year is now complete, and the process of creating schedules has now begun. The life skills students in the Library and Media Center staff put on a production of The Japanese Stonecutter, a Japanese folktale about a poor stonecutter who, despite having his wishes granted, is still unsatisfied. The play was overall successful, and the students and staff involved all had a great time. This Wednesday will be POMPROG State Testing Day. Juniors will be taking SATs, which will assess reading and math. Sophomores will be taking the CAP test, which will assess science. Freshmen will take a practice CAP test. In addition, freshmen and sophomores will be meeting with their guidance counselors. Seniors will have an opportunity to engage in a scholarship and resume writing workshop led by Mrs. Belleville. And members of our English department will be available to provide feedback on student essays. Thank you.
Any questions of the student representatives? Okay, there being none, thank you very much. Moving on, presentations, the 2016-17 superintendent's budget.
Thank you, Mrs. Perry, and thank you to all the members of the public who are here in the audience. I appreciate that you are here tonight. I will begin the presentation of the budget with the Region 15 mission statement. I do this because our budget reflects our mission. Region 15's mission statement commits us to excellence for every student. The budget that I present is our investment in the future of our children. It represents decision-making made in the best interest of our students and balanced by responsible spending. We owe our students the best education that we as a community can afford. I bet most of us here remember classrooms that look like this one. These classrooms worked for those of us of a certain age. Children sat in rows, they faced the teacher, they wrote down what the teacher said, they practiced exercises, and they tried to remember what was taught. Today's students are growing up in a different world than the one in which we grew up. Their learning spaces and their learning materials need to reflect that different world. Here you see a collaborative learning space that's equipped with technology. Technology in and of itself does not teach, but it powerfully expands the breadth and depth of learning possible. Our students are growing into an increasingly complex and global world, one that will be fundamentally different from the world in which we live now. By the time many of our kindergartners enter the workforce, they will have jobs that may yet not even exist. So if we don't even know yet what kind of jobs our youngest learners will have when they enter the world of work, we then must prepare them for a future of thinking, of sense-making, of evaluating, a world in which technologies will play an increasingly important role, and a world in which technologies will actually change the nature of work. This is the education that we seek to bring to our children, the best for their future, not for what served us in the past. On September 21st of this school year, the Region 15 Board of Education approved a long-term district goal designed to promote the kind of 21st century learning that is required of all of our students. This work is already in process, and it will guide the district's direction for the foreseeable future. I thank the board for being so forward-thinking as to have approved these goals. There are 6 learner expectations embedded within this long-term district goal. The first, in the area of collaboration, we want our students to work in teams, to share responsibility for collaborative work, and to build consensus toward a shared goal. Just like us, they are stronger together and smarter for working together. We want our students to work on authentic and challenging problems by collecting, questioning, evaluating, and analyzing relevant information, by making judgments and decisions about what information is needed, how to get it, and how to assess its reliability. We call that critical thinking. We want our students to articulate thoughts and ideas in a variety of forms and contexts, to choose the form to suit the context, the audience, and the purpose. We want our students to interpret spoken, written, and quantitative information, and to revise ideas and positions based on new understanding. We want our students to actively engage their curiosity and motivation to push boundaries, to take creative risks, and to produce novel ideas and products. We want them to reflect on, critically evaluate, revise, and communicate original ideas, and to persevere when faced with a challenge or with contradictory information. We want our students to act in ways that demonstrate honesty, responsibility, respect, and caring, honoring the unique qualities of each individual and appreciating how these differences contribute to the rich tapestry that makes up our community. We want our students to recognize the rapidly changing nature of the global landscape and to demonstrate the capacity and disposition to understand and act on issues from a global perspective. The budget that I present tonight supports our ongoing work in these 21st century learning expectations. I'm going to show you now a very short video of a math lesson that's an exemplar of what excellent instruction for the 21st century looks like. It represents the high standard that is exemplified in all of our classrooms. Now, it would be impossible for me to show you all 6 of the Region 15 21st century learning expectations in one very short video. But I ask you to listen for critical thinking in the why questions. Look for a collaborative classroom environment, look for communication, and look for understanding by making sense of symbolic notation.
Beautiful. So start putting solutions on your number line. I always want every math problem to make sense. How do I show that negative 4.9 also works? My kids, they're not robots, they're not machines, they're not looking at a problem and applying this technique that I taught them to do. They're looking at a problem, understanding what it means, and coming up with a solution that makes sense to them. Does negative 5 work? Today you're going to see my lesson on linear inequalities. I like to start all my lessons with concept first, notation last. Is 0 bigger than negative 3?
Yes, wait, yes.
Should we put a dot there?
Yes.
Okay. We have never done any inequality work at all in this class. We've only done equation work. So that extends to inequalities. Who can give me a number that works? There's definitely a standard that students need to solve linear inequalities. So you have a number, it gets multiplied by another number and added to another number, and it's less than or greater than or equal to some other numbers. We have not fully developed that whole standard in just this lesson. We definitely have more work to do. Why is 5 a solution? This was very much a basic lesson on understanding what it means to solve an inequality and how to read the notation of inequality problems. Is that going to be less than 10? Yes. So many of my kids already know how to multiply and add and subtract with positive and negative numbers. So if I can make that inequality problem just thinking about number, and then lay on top of what they already know some new information, it has something to stick onto.
Okay. On this slide, you see some areas of investment that I am asking the board to make in this budget. Technology, textbooks, a new social studies course at the high school, new lab interfaces at the high school, and new wrestling mats. And we will go forward and look at these one at a time. So let's start with technology. I spoke before about the importance of technology to adequately prepare our students for the world that they are growing into. Keeping our technology up to date allows us to use technology to further our 21st century learning expectations. One of the issues that the board faced last year was that in prior years, we had not always kept up with a responsible spending plan for technology. The current year's budget began a regular replacement program for laptops and desktops, and it began upgrading our infrastructure. As a result, this year we are experiencing improved internet connectivity as a result of having replaced unreliable laptops and desktops and having improved the infrastructure. This regular replacement plan must continue if we are to maintain current and reliable equipment and internet access. Next year, we will need to replace additional laptops and desktops that are beyond their usable life and no longer reliable or suitable. Note that we are replacing them in a very cost-conscious manner. The unit costs that you see are for refurbished equipment that comes with a warranty and is less than half the price of new equipment. We will be leasing this equipment with no dollar impact in next year's budget. We will also be able to complete the upgrade of the infrastructure that we began this year, and we will be able to do that in largest part through a competitive grant for which we applied and which we were awarded. So again, there is no dollar impact to next year's budget for the wireless upgrade. Replacement of switches and servers completes the infrastructure upgrade with a total dollar impact of $73,000. Last year, the board approved a new textbook for elementary mathematics. That implementation has been very successful this year in grades K to 3. The program has been very well received by students, parents, and teachers, and it does an excellent job of incorporating Region 15's 21st century learning expectations: critical thinking, collaboration, communication, and innovation. Yes, you can have innovation in math, and when we get to the next slide, I'll show you a little picture of what that might look like. We had planned the implementation of the new materials in 2 parts, K to 3 this year, and that is happening, and 4 to 5 next year. Therefore, the budget that I present to you tonight includes funding for the new math textbooks for grades 4 and 5 next year at a cost that you see on the slide of $62,835. So now I will ask you to watch another very short video. This one is our 3rd graders doing a measurement lesson. I'd like you to listen for estimation, collaboration, and innovation as our children demonstrate multiple and innovative ways to measure and to think proportionately.
1/3 would be like around here.
Oops, sorry. I'll try that again.
Wait, so we estimated that 1/3 would be like around here. I mean, Miss Rosa never told us that it had to be on a leaf. So what if we just took this and then oh my, 1, and then 5, 6. It's gotta be like right. It's gotta be like on the line here. It's more than 1/3 and less than 5, 6 because this would be 1/3, this would be 1/3, and this would be 1/3, and 5, 6 would be right about here. This would be halfway, and so let's measure it. So Sydney, what have you found? What do you think it is? Looks like 10.5. Okay. About 17.5. 2.5. I think it's about 1/2. What do you think? Because like it might be a little bit past it, but like either 1 3/4 or 1/2. So.
At our middle schools, we are currently using open source, internet-based materials for math. We would like to build on the success that we've seen with our new math program at the elementary level this year by making a careful selection from available materials for middle school. A committee of teachers and administrators has been doing a careful review, and they are in the final stages of that process now. The committee will be completing its work before the 3rd budget workshop, so I will update the board with a final recommendation in time for the board's presentation of its budget. The committee's recommendation could be to adopt a new text for next year for grades 6, 7, and 8, or to adopt a new text for next year for 1 or 2 of those grades, or to not adopt a new text next year. We will not move forward unless we find an excellent choice. $80,000 is a realistic number that would cover the adoption for all of grades 6, 7, and 8 next year. And that amount is in the budget that I am presenting to you tonight. Tonight, a little later on the agenda, the board will be giving a first presentation of a new course for Pomperaug High School, Global Problem Solving. This course has already been vetted through the board's Policy and Curriculum Committee and will be voted on by the full board at a subsequent meeting. It's a course that I'm particularly excited about because it so clearly addresses Region 15's 21st century learning expectation of global citizenship. Students will learn how significant world issues manifest themselves on the local level, and they will plan and implement a high-impact capstone project. They will evaluate the effectiveness of government, non-governmental organizations, and nonprofits in addressing problems and issues like transportation, unemployment, or clean drinking water. No textbooks will be purchased for this course, nor would any textbooks in fact be appropriate. The most relevant materials for student research will be government, nonprofit, and community organization websites, newspapers, library databases, and so on, all internet-based and available at no additional cost. Students may also decide to interview local community leaders or community leaders who are not local using internet-based video conferencing tools. The cost that you see on the screen of $1,477 covers curriculum writing, professional development, and teacher resources. Our current textbook for advanced placement biology is 10 years old. It no longer meets current standards, and we must replace it. The recommended text was presented just about an hour ago at the board's Policy and Curriculum Committee meeting this evening. The approval of the text will be coming up at a subsequent meeting for approval by the full board. It will be a 2017 edition. As we always do, we consider any fiscal efficiencies that might be realized by buying electronic textbooks. In this case, the less expensive option over the 10 years expected for the use of the new text is to purchase the hardcover texts, which come with a 6-year license for the electronic texts as well. The cost is $8,018. This budget includes an allocation for new interfaces that would be used in chemistry and physics labs at the high school to collect sensor data. They have built-in graphing and analysis application. This equipment is an example of technology use that doesn't teach in and of itself, but that allows students to collaborate, communicate quantitative information, analyze the data from multiple perspectives, and to think critically to draw conclusions. The cost is $5,588. The current wrestling mats in the practice room at Pomperaug High School are damaged as a result of over 10 years of normal wear and tear, and they can no longer be repaired. Wrestling mats must be intact so that they can be properly cleaned for health reasons, and that is no longer the case for ours. The budget includes an allocation for replacing them at a cost of $12,000. As we all know, it takes funding to educate our children, and we need to consider our funding in its historical perspective. Every year, as we all know, costs go up. For 2 years, in 2011-12 and 2012-13, we were able to bring our voters 2 consecutive budgets of a 0% increase. We accomplished that by applying rigorous cost-cutting measures that allowed us to absorb annual increases. We continue to apply these rigorous cost-cutting measures, and as a result, there is no longer anywhere to absorb annual increases. This evening, I bring you a very responsible budget increase of 2.86%. So how did we get here? Mr. McLiverty, Mr. Gussenberg, and I have met personally with each administrator, and we have reviewed budget requests relative to alignment with district mission and goals. Every year, we also review student enrollment, not just by total number of students, but by grade and school, to ensure that students have the services that they need and that we also honor our responsibility to our taxpayers. This year, we face 6 budget challenges. Every year, as I mentioned, costs go up. We all know that. What's unique about school budgets is that fixed costs, those that are obligated by contract, are over 97% of the entire budget. These fixed costs include salaries, insurances, transportation, tuition, debt service. Only instructional costs could be considered discretionary, and they are less than 3% of the entire budget. One of our primary budget drivers remains the impact of the 2 years of 0% budget increases in 11-12 and 12-13, which were accomplished, as I said, by having taken rigorous cost-cutting measures. In those years, those cost-cutting measures allowed us to absorb our increases. So while fixed costs went up, we absorbed the increase by taking those cuts. It worked well in those 2 years, allowing us to bring in those 2 0% budgets. Of course, once we found those cost-cutting measures, we are responsible to our public to continue them, and we do. But there are no longer new cuts that can continue to absorb the increase in fixed costs. Put simply, there's no more rigorous cost-cutting measures that we can use to absorb the increase in fixed costs. In the last 3 years, the board has brought to the voters, and the voters have generously passed, budgets between 2.48 and 2.82%. Every year, those budgets were struck to be as lean as possible. And every year, I have had to institute a spending freeze early in the school year. In a school district, the majority of the budget is contractual. The only part of the budget that could be considered discretionary is the instructional budget, which, as I said before, is less than 3% of the total budget. That part of the budget had to be frozen to accommodate unanticipated costs that came our way after we had developed such lean budgets. So every year, things like professional development, professional books, classroom supplies, and periodicals went unpurchased to ensure that we could make it to the end of the year in a fiscally responsible manner. This year, we faced unanticipated special education costs of over $900,000 beyond our planned budget. It is our legal, moral, and ethical responsibility to cover these costs, despite the fact that they came to us after we had adopted a lean student-by-student budget. In next year's budget, we will have to fund those unanticipated increased costs, and we will also have to provide for contingency funds to allow us to cover any additional unanticipated costs. Statute calls for 85% state funding of per-student costs that are in excess of 4.5 times our average per-pupil cost. We budget net, anticipating these funds. But last year, we received only 73%, not 85%, meaning that we had to pick up the unbudgeted difference. This year, the numbers are not yet in from Hartford. We budgeted our current budget anticipating 76% as opposed to the statutory 85%. And we are now expecting to receive only about 66%, again leaving us to cover the state's shortfall within our own budget. We have no choice but to fund this shortfall, and that challenge is exacerbated by the fact that we plan as lean a budget as possible. Again, there's no room within which to absorb the state's shortfall in funding. And the truest challenge of the budgetary constraints that I've described here is the challenge of carrying forth our mission of maintaining Region 15's excellence in education. The items listed as the secondary budget drivers here are those improvements that I discussed earlier. Technology, math textbooks at elementary and middle school, and at the high school, a new course, new textbooks, new lab materials, and new wrestling mats. Costs were listed on the previous slides, and I'll summarize them again in a later slide. So every budget has its challenges, and here are the cost savings measures that respond to those challenges. We have been self-insured for the past 3 years, allowing us to bypass the management fee, saving us over $1 million each year. Particularly good news is that we have had very low claims this year, which allows us to not increase our medical budget for next year. Usually, annual increases range from 7 to 10%, which for us would have been an increase of about $800,000. Because of the excellent claims history this year, we do not need to reflect any increase in our medical budget for next year. We have converted from oil to natural gas at Pomperaug High School and at Rochambeau Middle School, and we continue to realize savings as a result of that. As I shared in a previous slide, we received a grant to upgrade the wireless network, a necessary cost that we would have had to budget were it not for the grant. This is saving us $84,250 in new costs. And 19 teachers have committed to taking advantage of a retirement incentive pending board approval later in this meeting. This would allow us to realize a cost savings of $390,000. One more way in which we respond to our budget challenges is by responsible staffing practices. This is a retrospective look at enrollment and staffing. We hit our highest October 1st enrollment in 2007 at 4,572. If you look at the chart, you can see that we have been responding to enrollment changes in a very responsible manner. We have added instructional services in every year for the past 6 years, and we have reduced staff when possible. In particular, in the past 3 years, we have reduced 17 professional staff positions. We are sometimes asked, for example, if we lose 60 students, why can't we cut 2 teachers? The answer is that usually these students are not all in the same place. They're not in the same grade, they're not in the same school. Rather, they're spread out among the schools and the grades. It takes time for the enrollment decrease to aggregate enough so that we can make staffing reductions. In the 17 staffing reductions that you see over the past 3 years, those are examples of the enrollment decline aggregating sufficiently over the previous years to allow us to reduce staffing without reducing services to students. We are also sometimes asked why we haven't closed a school. Since our highest enrollment of 4,572 students in 07-08, we have lost 760 students. It sounds like enough to close a school, but once again, the students are not in the same school, at the same level, or in the same grade. Currently, we are not in a position to close a school because doing so would put us over the functional capacity of the remaining schools at any level. Nevertheless, if enrollment continues to decline as projected, we will be approaching a critical mass of enrollment loss that will require us to think proactively about our enrollment trends and the options for space utilization that are available to us. Making a decision to consolidate is one that must be entered into very carefully as part of a long-term enrollment and space utilization plan and under the guidance of professional consultants in these areas. Region 15 did that 4 years ago, and the decision of the committee, after examining all the variables, was to modify school boundary lines. That plan is what is in effect now. Next year, after the October 1st enrollment data are in, I plan to appoint a task force of community members and staff members under the leadership of a professional enrollment and space utilization consulting firm to examine the options relative to where we will be in 2020. The committee will be tasked with identifying options to address space utilization and with taking into account the perspectives of stakeholders, the potential for increased costs due to necessary modification of the physical plant, and increased transportation cost. They will also consider the impact on instructional program, the impact on students and families, and the bottom line financial impact to the district, both long and short term. The budget that I am presenting this evening is framed on next year's needs. Long-term needs will be addressed through a long-term process. So let's take a look at next year's needs based on current enrollment. These are the numbers that count when planning for next year's budget. Let's look at the elementary portion first, which you see in the topmost portion. What you see in the yellow columns are our class size guidelines. They are not strict class size maxima, but guidelines. And you can see by scanning the numbers that we're very close to these guidelines in just about all cases. Now, just by way of an example, you might look for example, at the current 4th grade at MES. The numbers there at 19, 18, and 18 are lower than our guideline of 23. But with a total of 55 students, condensing them into 2 classes would give us class sizes of 27 and 28, and that's too high. Middle school is represented here by homeroom numbers, going right across the middle of the chart. When I look at middle school broad stroke, I do the calculations that you see summarized in the box on the lower left. From our 4 5th grade classes, we will have 288 students entering 6th grade. From our current 8th grade class, we will have 349 students exiting. That gives us a delta of 61 fewer students at middle school next year. And you see that we are prepared for a reduction in 2.2 FTEs for next year at the middle school level. The calculation is done in a similar way for the high school. It's summarized in the middle box on the bottom. We have 349 students exiting grade 8. We typically have 5 to 10% of our 8th graders who go to private or parochial high schools. So using a 10% attrition rate, we get 314 as an estimated size of the incoming 9th grade class. And we have 285 graduating, giving us a net increase of 29 students at PHS. With that increase, I am not asking for additional staff. In addition, we have found some efficiencies that result in a reduction of 1.0 FTE. So as you saw in the previous slide, over the past 3 years, we had reduced 17 professional staff positions. Next year, we will reduce an additional 3.2 teaching positions for a total reduction of 20.2 FTEs in the last 4 years. The staff reductions at the middle school and high school levels that we looked at in the previous slide are coming from several departments across schools, and they reflect a careful analysis of enrollment by course for next year. The net result is a reduction of 3.2 FTEs. Next year, we must provide an additional self-contained class for high-need special education students. So you see a necessary increase of 1 special education teacher. The budgetary impact of this increase will be more than offset by cost avoidance in this area. In 2014-15, we had cut allocations for outside school psychologist services at Pomperaug High School. We now need to restore that service cut, and this budget does that by increasing our FTE by 4/10. Of course, the balance that needs to be struck in a budget is weighing the board's mission to maintain an excellent 21st century education for the children of Middlebury and Southbury against the board's fiscal responsibility to our communities. One way to assess fiscal responsibility is to look at comparative data among districts. To do that, the State Department of Education calculates comparative spending. This particular set of data, net current expenditures per pupil, establishes an equitable database with which to compare per pupil costs among local and regional boards of education. These are objective data that are helpful as an indicator of comparative spending. And that indicator sheds objective light on fiscal efficiency. The most recent data available are from 2014-15. And those data show that Region 15 spending was in the bottom half of all districts statewide. So with spending in the bottom half of all districts in the state, and the requests that the board and I will ultimately make to our voters to invest in education, it is also fair to ask, what return on our investment have we been getting? And the answer is a very high rate of return. Our standardized test results are consistently above the state average, and we are consistently comparable with similar districts. We also had 71 students honored as AP scholars or higher this past year, and those results are consistent over the past years. Not on this slide is the fact that last year we had 2 National Merit finalists in the class of 2015. Last year, our high school students' performance on the state tests put them in the #1 ranked position in the state in language arts, and in the #4 position in the state in math, with PHS overall being the highest performing school in the entire state. So I think it fair to say that for comparative spending in the bottom half of the state, the return on that spending is exceptionally high. In fact, in the case of the high school standardized tests, at the very top. Here is how we compared last year in our advanced placement test results and our SAT results. And in both cases, you can see that the data points are very, very strong. From the class of 2015, over 90% of students indicated their plans to go on to college. Here is a sample of college acceptances for the class of 2015. It is an educator's source of pride, and I believe it's also a community's source of pride to send our students on to some of the very best colleges in the country. So I thank the board and the community for supporting our schools each year by investing in our students' future. Their future is the future of Middlebury and Southbury, and I think the data that I have shared here clearly point to a very high rate of return on an investment that is fiscally very prudent. The budget that I recommend to the board tonight proposes no cuts to services or programs for students. Particular examples of exemplary services, programs, and practices that we will continue to provide for our students are listed here. Full-day kindergarten, SRBI services for students who are experiencing academic difficulties, continuing to upgrade curricula and update our library materials, both in our libraries and in our classrooms, continuation of the Digital Learning Academy, continuation of advanced placement courses, continuing our commitment to updating technology, and maintaining reasonable class sizes. And in addition to maintaining those exemplary programs and practices, this budget provides for the new initiatives and improvements that are listed here. I've already discussed them, and here you see the financial impact in one place. Here is the total budget amount of $67,130,145. This budget amount is net of expected non-tax revenue, meaning that all state and federal grant funds have been applied. The graphic shows the proportional distribution of the total dollar amount of the proposed budget by object codes: salaries, insurances, transportation, instruction, purchase services, facilities, tuition, and debt. It is significant to note that the only object in the budget that is discretionary is the instructional object. It's in yellow, and that is only 2.43% of the total budget. All the other objects are driven by contractual or other obligated costs. So this is the part of the presentation where I'll go through each object code and give a broad overview. This slide shows the increase in salaries from the 15-16 budget to the 16-17 budget. This dollar increase represents an increase of 1.12% over the total 15-16 budget. So just to understand how these calculations are done, when we go through each object code, the percent increases over the total 15-16 budget that will be given in the top left of each slide, those will all add up to the total budget increase of 2.86% at the end. Salaries are the largest part of any district budget. The increases over the last year are contractually obligated to salaries and required additional contributions to Social Security and Medicare. This year, we have a significant offset of $390,000 from the retirement incentive. Insurance covers property insurance, liability insurance, and medical benefits. We do have increases in all but medical, and these increases are offset by savings realized from being self-insured and as a result of our claims history this year. Self-insurance is saving us $1 million each year, and this year, because of our excellent claims history, we have no increase, and that's as opposed to more typical increases of about $800,000 per year. We have an increase in our transportation costs this year for both in-district transportation and out-of-district transportation. The instruction budget includes instructional supplies such as classroom supplies, technology, and annual subscriptions to network management and database programs. There is a small increase in classroom and school supplies over last year's budget, most of which is designed to provide hands-on materials to support the new math programs for elementary and middle school. As you saw before, we are putting $173,620 into a lease to fund the replacement of laptops and desktops, resulting in no increase for that purpose in this object code. As a result, we have a small decrease in this object code overall. The lease purchase agreement in the first bullet that you see is now the third year of a 4-year obligation. And the lease purchase agreement in the second bullet is the lease that I discussed earlier to replace desktops and laptops. We also have additional costs in purchase services for special education, like occupational therapy and speech therapy. We have a small increase in facilities costs, and you see that the largest part of that comes from the increase in sewer assessments. We are required to pay tuition for our students who go to vocational schools, magnet schools, and special education schools. Most of the increase here is due to outplacements for special education. And since we budget only those tuitions that are necessary based on a student-by-student analysis, when students are newly identified for out-of-district services, we have to absorb those additional unanticipated costs. This budget provides $100,000 for such contingency. And finally, debt service is a repayment of our obligated debt to pay off bonds that were floated to fund construction projects, the most recent being the addition of the new high school main gym. We have a decrease in this line as a natural part of the paydown process. This table shows a comparison of the proportional share of the region's budget that will be the fiscal responsibility of each town. The proportional share is based on the proportion of students that Region 15 educates from each town, and by law, the calculation is based on enrollment on October 1st of the previous year. You see that Middlebury's proportional share is increasing by about 0.5%, and Southbury's share is decreasing by that same amount. Here is the detail that identifies where the budget increases are going for a total increase of 2.86%. In particular, you can see the salary increases as they are offset by the reduction next year of 3.2 FTEs and by the savings from the retirement incentive. You can also see the additional special education costs reflected in the transportation and tuition lines. As a teacher, I believe it's good practice to give a short summary before concluding a lesson, especially if the lesson has been a little long. So here's the summary. This budget replaces aging technology. It provides new math texts for elementary and middle school. It funds a new course in textbooks at the high school. It provides new interfaces for science labs and new wrestling mats at the high school. All efficiencies and initiatives from prior years are continuing, and this year we are taking a savings from a retirement incentive, and we have no increase in health benefits. We are funding our fixed costs, we are maintaining reasonable class size, and we have included funding for unanticipated contingencies, with a total budget increase over last year of 2.86%. Here's the calendar of next steps in the budget process. All of these meetings are open to the public, and time will be allotted for public comment, so I ask that you all please do come. Date of the referendum is here on this slide. This PowerPoint will be on our website tomorrow. The video is being ably converted by our student, Jordan Osella, who is behind closed doors as he is coordinating all of this technology for us. Jordan will get it on the website, the video of today's meeting. As soon as he can, it will be sometime next week. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. I really don't necessarily want to open up for, board questions, but are there any comments? I'm sure we'll have plenty of questions during the first budget workshop on March 9th. I do want to ask the board members, in order to save time for the workshops, if there are any major areas that you would like to see covered during the workshop, could you please let our superintendent or Mr. McLiberty know beforehand, so at least they'll have the figures there. So any comments about the presentation? Okay. I thank you for all your hard work. I'm sure this was no easy task. Moving on, could I have a motion for approval of the minutes of the January 25th meeting, please?
Motion to approve the minutes of the January 25th, 2016 regular meeting.
May I have a second? Are there any discussion? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Unanimous. Thank you. Under Information and Proposals, Board Committee Reports, Finance and Facilities Committee.
Madam Chair, we haven't had a finance meeting, so there's no report for this evening.
Okay, thank you. Policies and Curriculum Committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the board packet is information on 2 new social studies course proposals. At the last P&C meeting, Region 15 Humanities Chair Mrs. Nicole Vibert and Mrs. Stacy Clark reviewed the present grades 9 to 12 scope and sequence in social studies. Mrs. Vibert discussed the new standards in social studies and noted that much of the content of freshman year's Modern World History 1 is now being taught in the middle school. One of the proposals before the board tonight renames World History 2 to Modern History, and then this course would now be taught in 9th grade, allowing U.S. history to be moved to 10th grade. And in turn, this will allow development of junior year electives to meet increased state requirements. Students were surveyed and potential new electives were discussed. These electives would be determined and developed in subsequent years. The second course proposal before the board for a first read tonight in the area of social studies is a new course called Global Problem Solving. And Superintendent Botsford talked about this course in her budget presentation. So if there are any questions on those two new courses, if you could get them to really any committee member or me or Mr. Gusenberg, maybe we could get those questions answered for you at the next meeting, a full board meeting when we vote on these. Also, the March 14th PNC is canceled, so the next PNC meeting is March 28th. And that is all, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Any questions of Steve?
Yes, I'm just wondering, when we vote on this at our next meeting, are we voting on the 3-year plan, or are we voting on just the 1-year, the book, the resources for the first year? How is that working? Because there's a 3-year plan laid out in this for the social studies.
To look, I thought the costs were just for to be incurred next year, Rich?
The proposal before the board is for the individual courses. You have an elimination of the World History 1 course and a renaming of the World History 2 course. And then you have a second course that you are approving, the Global Problem-Solving course. So there are plans which Nicole presented at our meeting as we go forward, but each of those would have to come to the board separately. You're not voting on the entire high school sequence. You're voting only on the individual courses.
And that's reflected in here with the 1477, so it's the 1-year cost.
Any other questions? Okay, moving on. Other committee reports, PTO Advisory Council.
Yes, Mrs. Bosford reported that the Bridges Math Night, which was conducted by the 4 elementary principals, was very well attended. The slides and resources, if you missed it, are available on each elementary school's website under the News and Announcements tab. Also, Mrs. Botsford will be giving a condensed budget presentation and be available to answer questions at 2 schools on March 8th. 9:30 a.m. at MES and 7 p.m. at PES. Thank you.
Any questions of Jennifer? Okay, board member comments?
Madam Chair, may I give a SMART report, please?
You certainly may.
Thank you. SMART met on January 26th. The February SMART meeting was canceled due to snow, and the next meeting is Tuesday, March 27th at Southbury Town Hall. All are welcome. At the January meeting, Mr. Longarini updated the group about Diversity Day at Pomperaug High School and discussed 2 possible upcoming speakers at the high school, Dr. Dan Switchenko to discuss the impact of substance abuse upon academic and athletic performance, and the Archie Foundation to discuss suicide. To support ongoing school climate initiatives at Rochambeau, the middle school partnered with the RMS PTO and SMART to bring in Mr. John Halligan on February 17th to conduct a student assembly program during the school day and parent information session at night, both of which focused on bullying and cyberbullying. Mr. Halligan has also recently presented at Memorial Middle School. He has shared his story with over 1,300 schools across the nation to help students better understand the impact of bullying. And during the February 17th programs, he relayed his experiences as a father whose 13-year-old son was incessantly bullied by peers. The Smart Parent University series continued in February with the Parenting for Your Child's Success workshop last Thursday. The free workshop presented the different developmental stages that children progress through and strategies for positive parenting for their success. Future possible SMART endeavors discussed included a parent survival guide in April or May and a possible workshop for middle school boys and their parents. Possible topics for that workshop would potentially be the emotional side of boys, body image issues, access to sexual images on the internet, and safety using online sites, video, electronics, and gaming. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Steve. Any other comments?
I attended the parent presentation at Rochambeau Middle School that was called Ryan's Story that Steve mentioned. It was funded by both the RMS PTO and by SMART. And as Steve mentioned, the presentation was conducted by Mr. Halligan, whose middle school son committed suicide because of bullying. Mr. Halligan inspired students to make positive changes in their lives towards reducing bullying, cyberbullying, and preventing suicides. Students were encouraged to examine their own lives and how they treat others, and bystanders were inspired to be upstanders and no longer stand by bullying. The parent evening presentation was titled, "If I Could Have a Do-Over," and it involved Mr. Halligan guiding parents through the lessons that he learned from this tragedy. He addressed the latest social media problems facing preteens and teens, and we received handouts with recommendations for technology use by our children. And parents also got a very clear message that we need to take responsibility of how our child uses technology and interacts with peers and in people and online, in person and online. I found Mr. Halligan's presentation to be deeply moving and educational. He gave solid parental advice that I will never forget, such as the fact that most social media is against the law for kids under 13 years of age. And he showed how parents should continuously monitor their child's technology devices. And he also said that the most important person to stop a bully is his or her friend. So thank you to the RMS PTO and to SMART for funding these presentations. And I understand that Mr. Bernardi sought out this presentation and made all the arrangements. So thank you for caring so much about Region 15 students and parents. You truly enriched our education here. And for anyone who could not attend the parent night or is interested in learning more, you can go to www.ryanstory.org. It's well worth your time to visit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. And any other comments? Okay, there being none, moving on to the superintendent's report.
The board has the personnel report. And this is just a little bit of a follow-up on some of the comments made by Mr. Sirianni and Mrs. Manzo regarding Ryan's story. We have heard presentations by our high school principal on efforts to develop and sponsor and continue to support a climate of trust and caring among students and between students and staff at the high school. What I wanted to let you know is just some examples of the ways in which we are doing this at the elementary and middle schools as well. And certainly the comments about Ryan's story was one that was quite impactful. But I'd like to add to that as well. GES and Long Meadow are participating in Start with Hello. That is a program that is sponsored by the Sandy Hook Promise. Rochambeau Middle School spotlights students every month for exhibiting positive character traits such as integrity, perseverance, and kindness. MMS and PES are participating in efforts designed to encourage students to get to know each other, to get to know others with whom they don't normally sit. And these are known by different names. It could be Mix It Up Day, Make a Change Day, or No One Eats Alone. So when you hear your children talking about this, you'll know what it's about. MES also participated about 2 weeks ago in the Great Kindness Challenge. I personally received, I have to say, at least 30 or 40 beautiful thank you letters from students. I thank all of those students for those thank you letters, and I want everyone here to know that that was all before I called any snow days. So those are just a few examples of the kinds of things that are going on in our schools on a regular basis to really address the social emotional side of learning as well. And the last piece is just to to announce the dates for some parent information sessions. As I spoke about what we affectionately call in the district the 6 C's: communication, critical thinking, collaboration. Oh, let's see if I can get them all right. Innovation, global citizenship, character. Did I get 6? Thank you. You're nodding. I'll take it. That set of 21st century learning expectations, we are planning on having some parent sessions to help parents understand a little bit more about what we're doing and why. There are 2 dates. One is for elementary parents. The date for elementary parents has been changed. The date is correctly now, April 6th at 6 o'clock p.m. until 7:30 p.m. It is at Long Meadow. And the date for middle school and high school parents is April 20th from 7 to 8 p.m. Here in the AP room at the high school. Thank you.
Comments from citizens? Okay, there being none. We have no old business, new business requiring board action. I need a motion for approval of updates to policy number 5113.2, attendance, truancy, and chronic absenteeism.
Move that the Board of Education, upon recommendation by the Policy and Curriculum Committee, approves the updates of policy number 5113.2, attendance, truancy, and chronic absenteeism as presented.
Is there a second? Any discussion? There being none, all in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Unanimous, thank you. I need a motion for approval of updates to policy number 5114, student discipline.
Move that the Board of Education, upon recommendation by the Policy and Curriculum Committee, approves the updates to policy number 5114, student discipline, as presented.
Is there a second? Second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Abstentions? Unanimous, thank you. Go ahead. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Abstentions? Unanimous, thank you. Approval of early retirement incentive.
Move that the Board of Education, upon recommendation by the Finance and Facilities Committee, approves the early retirement incentive with the PTA as presented.
PEA.
What did I say?
PTA. We can't have those, we can't,
Glasses weren't in focus.
we can't have those parents retire
Right.
early.
PTA. Sorry about
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Unanimous, thank you. Announcement of future meeting dates. Oh, boy, there's a list. Wednesday, March 9th, Finance and Facilities Committee at the PHS Media Center, 6:30.
Madam Chair, that may be changed to follow the budget workshop that night.
Okay,
We'll get a notice out on that.
okay. Don't put that on your calendar. Budget workshops at the Media Center will be Wednesday, March 9th, Wednesday, March 16th, and Tuesday, March 22nd. And I'll repeat those, 9th, 16th, and 22nd of March will be the budget workshops at the Media Center at the beginning at 7 o'clock. On Monday, March 14th, that's, the PNC meeting has been canceled. We will have an all Board of Education meeting in this room at 7:30. And on Monday, March 28th, Policies and Curriculum will meet before the regular board meeting on the 28th. Okay, that's about it. I'd like a motion to go into executive session. I know, I have. Yep, I got it. No, I'm, okay. I need a motion to go into executive purpose session for the purpose of a discussion regarding superintendent's contract. And I am also inviting in Mrs. Botsford and Mr. McLiberty. May I have a motion?
Move that the
Is there a second? All those in favor?
I had a question
Mhm.
first. Are you anticipating action after this
Probably,
meeting?
yes. Thank you, Janet. We will probably take action after the meeting. We will come back in open session and take a vote. Thank you for reminding me. All those in favor? Okay, I need a motion to adjourn. Oh. Any opposed to this? One opposition. Okay, one person opposed. Abstentions? Okay. One. No, Janet opposed. Abstained or opposed? I thought it was opposed. Okay. Okay, now I need a motion to go to adjourn.
Go into executive
Oh,
session.
that's right, I can't. No,
We already had public comments,
we already had public comments.
and nobody stood up. You did, it was already asked.
Yep.
No, it said public.
No, it said public comments.
Sorry, ladies.
Okay, you can break down the tables.